Worrying the narcissist will manipulate others. This is a question I get a lot from clients when we start to bring in third parties into a situation. Maybe you're dealing with teachers or experts, and people are really worried about a narcissistic or high conflict person manipulating those third parties. So I'm going to talk about what to watch for and what not to worry about. And it's probably not what you think it would be. So before we dive into this topic, let me just remind you, if you like this content, you find it helpful, don't forget to hit like on this video and also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. When we're dealing with a narcissistic person, we have to remember that, and when I say narcissistic, that's kind of like a very common word now, as we know, but it really applies, these principles apply to any type of high conflict person, okay? So sometimes that's narcissistic, sometimes it's borderline, sometimes it's bipolar, sometimes it's not a diagnosis. Sometimes people are just don't have good emotional intelligence and they just meet everything with conflict. So if you're dealing with a high conflict person, that can be really, really challenging. But a lot of times, for whatever reason, high conflict people tend to be able to charm, right? They can fool other people. I had this experience over and over in my first marriage where people would say, "Oh, your husband's so great. He's so nice. He's so awesome. He's so blah, blah, blah." And I used to think, "Oh, you don't live with him." Because when the door would close, it was a totally different person, right? But he could go and he could totally put on that front with other people and be very charismatic and very charming. I really have not met many people in my life that don't like my ex-husband, that at least people that don't get to know him well, right? And I better be careful. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But it's true. A lot of high conflict people, are able to charm in that situation. And even my late husband, Thomas, I remember when they went in for a custody, like we have in California, like sort of a mini custody eval process. And they went in and mom did so much better than him in that process. And they felt like she was more child focused. And I think it really just came down to he wasn't able to control his emotions. She was calm, she was centered, she was able to charm and put her best foot forward and all that. And he's kind of more socially awkward, struggled more and all that kind of thing. So, it was difficult for him. And when you're in those situations, I think we worry that the narcissist is going to manipulate those outside parties. And this comes into play when people have custody evals. People will say, "Well, I'm worried that the narcissist is going to charm the custody evaluator and the custody evaluator isn't going to see what's going on." Or this person is going to charm the therapist of the child. Or this person is going to charm, different people around us, other parents at school, teachers, all this kind of thing. Think about in the narcissistic realm in particular, when you're in relationship with that person, what happens is they manipulate through very close, that one-on-one interaction, right? If we think back to the beginning of the relationship, and if you've done any sort of research or therapy around this or anything, like the love bombing starts, right? That's the very first phase. And the manipulation kind of progresses from that point. And as we get further into the relationship, we get into things like they isolate you, right? Where you don't have those outside sources of sort of reality checks. And also, I think the reason they do that is so that they themselves can manipulate the narrative with you without you having an outside party that you can verify information with, right? So the isolation becomes part of the manipulation also. So when we're talking about third-party experts, or we're talking about friends and people at your children's school or other parents or whatever type of thing, that's a much more difficult situation for a narcissist to manipulate. Now, they may be able to charm, and they may be able to, on the surface, have the person go, "Oh, well, they seem like a nice enough person," and whatever. But the narcissist has to have that sort of intimate one-on-one interaction in order to be able to manipulate at that level. And so if it's not somebody that they're in close personal relationship with, and they're not able to be in that sort of private realm with the person, then they're not going to be able to have the ability to manipulate. If you think back, a lot of us have had this experience, but when you started ending this relationship, right? Or they started ending it or whatever, when the relationship broke down and you started not being with this person anymore, how many people said to you, we saw it, we saw things, we knew, and you want to go, well, why didn't you say something? And it's like, well, the reason they didn't say something is because our brain wouldn't have listened anyway, because we were flooded with the love bombing and the hormonal responses and all those kinds of things that shade your eyes from all the red flags, right? So, but a lot of people will say to you, oh, well, we knew, we saw it, we whatever. And why did they see it? Because they weren't the ones in that close personal relationship. So I say this to give you comfort because, number one, a custody evaluator, a therapist, somebody like that, I mean, if those people can't see what's going on, who can? Like, I don't know anybody else that, if nobody else can see it, they are the ones that should be able to see it. They're the experts. That's their job. That's what we're hiring them for. That's what we're bringing them into this for, is to see these issues and to be aware that they're there, right? So you really shouldn't be worried about the experts like that. When we're talking about friends, family, people at our church, friends with our children, all those types of people, again, a narcissist would have to get really close to that person most of the time to be able to have that level of manipulation. And they might be able to have some surface charm or whatever, but that's not usually enough to be able to like badmouth you or make somebody think negative things about you or whatever. If I don't know a person that well and they're telling me something negative about another person, I'm kind of taking it with a grain of salt. I don't really know that person well enough to know if that's a believable thing or not. And honestly, at the end of the day, we're so focused on what the other person is doing and what they're trying to manipulate. And the key to your entire custody case is your relationship and your bond with your child. If you are bonded with your child, there is almost nothing in this system that can supersede that, okay? I'm not saying weird things don't happen sometimes. I definitely have clients that I'm working with where we've had anomalies happen and I've had weird things happen that like don't make sense to me, of why the outcome was the way it was. But in the vast majority of cases, if you have a close bond with your child and you have a warm relationship and that is all there, the normal parenting, bonding, loving, nurturing stuff that we do with our kids, that is really the key to the entire case. Because at the end of the day, the court wants both parents to be involved. At the end of the day, the court wants you to have a warm bond with your child. They do want to ensure the child's safety. They do want to make sure there aren't any red flags around those concerns. And I have seen people manipulate and, create false allegations against the other person and all that. But honestly, over time, those things usually bear themselves out. So you might get a result from that in the very beginning where somebody's able to manipulate the narrative before the court really figures out what's going on or learns these two parties. But as you move through the process and things start to unfold naturally, then what usually takes front and center stage is the relationship with the children. And the court will start to see, oh, this parent actually does have a warm bonded relationship with the children. And there's no reason that they shouldn't be equally involved or have a high amount of parenting time, okay? A lot of that manipulation from the narcissist comes back to our own fear, right? We're afraid that they're going to get the upper hand. We're afraid they're going to convince somebody of something. That's all a trauma response, right? That all comes from being in this toxic relationship for however many years you were in it. And I always say that's not undone overnight. That takes time. You have to have people around you that are supporting you, that are kind of giving you that reality check of how you're processing things with your ex, mentally and emotionally, because you will keep falling back into that pattern that's been established. And it takes some very intentional and active, monitoring and self-correction and correction from the outside to help you start to change that path. And I think that's where the coaching is, really so valuable and can be very, very helpful to you. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page on my group coaching programs for moms and for dads. And there's also the ability to book a one-on-one call with me if you'd like to learn more about my VIP premium coaching services. That's usually for people that need a really high level of support. Either you're at the very beginning, you've got domestic violence, you've got a custody evaluation, your child has an attorney, all the chaos that ensues from this. That is usually where the premium coaching services can really provide you a lot of support. So go over, check that out, see what might work for you, and thanks for joining me.